Hello everyone, I'm your host Mariana and you're listening to A Degree Farther, the official podcast of the graduate school at Hood College, where we feature current students, alumni and faculty who are innovators on our campus and in our community.
Welcome to A Degree Farther, the show where we dive deep into the topics that matter most to our graduate community. I am Mariana, and today we are tackling an essential and often overlooked aspect of well-being: sexual wellness. Sexual wellness is a crucial part of our overall health, but it's a topic that can sometimes be shrouded in discomfort and stigma. As graduate students, we are navigating a complex landscape, balancing academic pressures, personal relationships, and our own well-being. That's why today we are bringing you expert insights and candid discussions about sexual wellness. We will explore what it means, why it's important, and how you can take steps to ensure that your sexual health is a positive and empowering part of your life. We will be joined by Jennifer Keilhotz, a Hood College professor with years of experience in sexual health education and counseling, who will share valuable information, answer common questions, and provide practical tips that you can apply right away. Jennifer was drawn to the helping profession after an exploration of human sexuality revealed how culture, education, gender, religion, and so many other factors shape our understanding of ourselves and our interactions with others. Recognizing a gap in social conversations and acceptance around the diverse expressions of sexuality, she found her passion in guiding others towards self-acceptance, tolerance, and the beauty within their relationships. After earning a bachelor's degree in psychology, she went on to complete a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling here at Hood College. Today, she is not only a licensed clinician in both Washington, D.C. and Maryland, but also an adjunct professor in the program. In her course, Intro to Sexual Wellness in Counseling, she equipped future counselors with the knowledge and sensitivity needed to navigate this crucial area of mental health. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Keilhotz. You can grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's get into it. This is A Degree Farther, and today we are talking about sexual wellness for grad students, staff, and faculty. Enjoy it! Hi everybody, we are again in a new episode of A Degree Farther, and today we are with an amazing guest, which is Jennifer Keilhotz. She is gonna talk with us about sexual wellness, which is a topic that is very important and essential in life, but also I think is something important to talk about in this school setting. So welcome, Jennifer, and thank you so much for being here today with us.
Yeah, thank you. I was excited to be a part of this.
Okay, as always, we can start talking about your background and what specifically things like lead you to be interested in sexual wellness.
Yeah. Well, it was definitely a choice later, or found, I guess, later. My background before I got into this, I was working in finance and banking, which is a very different, well, it's different, but it's things are very personal. Things are finances and sex, so they're seemingly different, but also very intimate and personal. So I was in finance and banking and decided to go back to school, and was always just very curious about sexuality, human sexuality as a whole, but also being single in my 20s and having a really close open relationships with my girlfriends. I was noticing like the dialogue we were having and just how differently we viewed sexual expression and the way that we interacted with people. And so once I was going back to school, I was thinking, is this a job that I could just kind of explore and talk about sex with people? And it turns out it is. So it was a long journey having to go back. I had not completed my undergrad, so I needed to finish my undergrad and then, of course, my master's here at Hood. But then specializing with the sex therapy lens and getting into a practice now that originally out of DC, focuses on primarily relationships and sex.
Okay, that's very interesting what you mentioned about how finances and sex can be very intimate. I never see it that way, but that's right.
Yeah, you see the typical relationship issues whenever I work with couples is money or sex. So they're both difficult topics.
You're right, yeah. And what are some common misconceptions about sexual wellness that you encounter in your practice and you think is important to talk about?
Well, I would say right now, and fortunately in our culture, there is real attention on sexual wellness and starting to normalize so many different sexual paths, interests, journeys. But with that comes a kind of its own kind of maybe pressures or expectations that, you know, sexuality is supposed to look a certain way. And so with, for example, everything being very sex positive, which is wonderful and important, sometimes we assign a definition to that, whether it's right or wrong, that it must mean that I'm supposed to be more open. Maybe I'm supposed to be into kinks, or I'm supposed to, explore different parts of my sexual orientation, because otherwise I'm not leaning into maybe more of a sex positive approach. Um, and so I would say that it's a wonderful moment culturally. We still have plenty of room to move, but that the misconceptions around wellness is that there's some kind of template that you're going to move into that qualifies as like healthy sexuality. It's so individual, the experience, and it really is about understanding your sexuality and then letting and just embracing however that comes up for you. It's not about looking a certain way or presenting a certain way. It's about whatever your version is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, how you see that with your in your work setting?
With clients. Yeah, so a lot of times, with the role of social media and technology, oftentimes, because I surprisingly to me, a couple years back, most of my clients are quite young, usually many under 30, but generally under 40, and coming with these kind of sexual scripts, these messages about what sexual wellness, sexual health, sexual positivity is meant to look like. And a lot of that comes from, we're scrolling and again, great information out there. But if you find yourself an individual who still has maybe or who desires more, maybe I desire monogamy, maybe I desire something that's deemed more vanilla, does that therefore suggest that I'm not open or being sex positive, that I'm constricting myself in some ways? And there's this little kind of internal struggle sometimes that shows up that way. And it is about, sometimes that is the case, and that, you peel back some layers and find that, no, I am curious about these other things, but there's something stopping me from exploring them. But other times you peel back and you're like, no, this feels right. This is okay. It's okay that it doesn't look like other people's, the way that they're expressing themselves. It's okay if I'm a younger person who is single and isn't open to having sex with multiple partners. And it's okay if I'm a person who wants to explore my sexuality through sex with other partners. There's this idea of it having to still look one way or the other. So I would say that typically tends to be how that shows up.
Okay. Like before, people was feeling wrong about wanting something else, and now people is feeling wrong about not wanting something else. That's what
Exactly.
that's
That's exactly right. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, extremes. That's interesting.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Down to even how a lot of people questioning. I work with a lot of polyamorous couples and individuals. And so then I find a lot of monogamous couples are kind of questioning, is this an, outdated way of managing a relationship? And for some people it is, but it doesn't mean that if you are not, that somehow you're getting it wrong, or that it somehow makes, creates this like conservatism around your sexual self.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're like, now you mentioned how like the importance of understanding like that whatever you want and you need and is individual decision and is like is gonna be okay because it's what you want.
Right.
How can we improve that sexual education to address those misconceptions and promote like healthier attitudes towards sexuality so people don't get stuck in those feelings?
Yeah. No, that's key, is the kind of the sex education that is lacking, just broadly lacking. The biggest thing I would say with the lack of discussion around sex at different stages as well of our kind of development. Sorry if you can hear that. There's like an automated thing going on. Is the lack of discussion around sexual pleasure in our education. So oftentimes the education that we're receiving is very biological, like this is what's, reproductive health and everything, which is very important. And then very like STIs, don't get pregnant, a little bit of what's happening with your body with women and their puberty and that process, and menstruation, men with their experiences, with arousal and erections, wet dreams, all of these things. We talk about kind of biologically what's happening, but we often, more often than not, no one is really discussing the idea of what it would mean to kind of encourage some self-exploration, encourage your own understanding of your body, the idea that there is pleasure to be had in your sexual experiences. And if you're going to be having them, be it solo or be it with a partner, understanding what provides you pleasure is a great tool to be able to ensure that the sexual experiences you have very early are, how they're meant to be, that they are about your own enjoyment and your own understanding. It's easier to discuss consent and boundaries if you know what yours are, if you understand what does or doesn't work for you, and we kind of normalize a dialogue around that. So for me, I would say the idea of like communication and pleasure in sex education is what's primarily lacking, and could certainly kind of change the trajectory that currently exists for this journey we all end up going on, where we tend to be more reactive than proactive in our experiences.
Yeah, I feel like before it was like a lack of information and a lot of pressure, especially maybe over woman, and then a lot of prohibit things. And then from one moment to other, and with social media and with a bunch of information, like we just pass like to the other extreme in which everything is possible, but then nobody, like there's no a middle education there, like a gap there where people just go from one thing to the other without any like what is going on, like, and how I address this.
Right. Yeah, and you mentioned kind of the pressures around pressures exist for everyone for sure around this subject, and certainly depending on generations and where you are age-wise. But for women, the other piece to kind of piggyback on what you're saying that I see is there is this pendulum shift where it is about sex positivity and embracing yourself, and you have a lot of women who happily really happily identify as feminists, and so this is like your moment, right? But again, am I not a feminist if I want something to look a little bit more maybe mild, or am I not a feminist if the things in my the things that I stand for and believe in my kind of day-to-day life conflict with the things that I learned turn me on and my fantasies and my desires. And so that's the other piece of this that often contradicts, that can be a struggle for people, as you're understanding what like that idea of sexual wellness and encompasses, that there's going to be a lot of contradictions in there as well, probably, and that's okay. But is there the space to sit with that, understand it, and have the education to inform, like, oh, yes, I might desire something like this, or something like this may turn me on, but in my life, that's not how I live, and that's okay.
Yeah. And how this is connected with mental health? Like, I know sexual wellness is part of the overall wellness, but how you see it in your work and in your life, of how this is
Yeah. Yeah, the so sexual wellness, I think in general, it's important to consider that so sexual wellness is not just an absence of dysfunction or an absence of struggle, but more so an intentionality of care, of exploration, of, again, of pleasure. So if you think about what that journey kind of requires, just as outside of sex in our lives, if we're pursuing something or we're wanting to grow in some area, the impact of our mental health certainly either enhances or prohibits that kind of growth, right? And so the biggest thing that I see, probably the most consistent issues with mental health that impact the clients that I see, is anxiety and depression. There are plenty of other mental health diagnoses out there that definitely show up in the space and is expressed through symptoms around sex and all of that, for sure. But the most consistent, particularly as it ties to performance, is anxiety and depression. It definitely tends to be the first, focus. A lot of men who pursue sex therapy have often kind of hit the medical approach first and have seen maybe urologists or their primary care doctors. And so come to find out, like, everything physically is right. It's something happening mentally going on. So that's where they end up sitting and talking and understanding a bit more of what's happening for them psychologically and how that's impairing the experiences that they want to have. So that tends to be the biggest impact on any kind of sexual performance issues, is anxiety and, again, and depression, but anxiety is the biggest one.
Okay. So you mentioned like a little bit about like cultural, social rules, how that impact in all the sexual wellness now and before, and we talk about that, and also about mental health that you just mentioned. So how you think that we could create like a more like supportive environment, that make people feel more comfortable to talk about these topics and have better sexual wellness in their lives?
Yeah, I would definitely say the earliest we can start to kind of normalize the discussion and some psychoeducation around sex is really, really is key, and doing so at an, age appropriately. Kids very young are at a friend's house and discovering on somebody's tablet, like, they see porn for the first time, or they're seeing behaviors that maybe they wouldn't typically see in their own home. And so instead of, again, being in a position of kind of reacting and having to kind of redirect them and come up off the top of your head kind of how to respond to that, this idea of, if we started to kind of normalize that this is a very important and common experience that all people will have. It's going to look different from different developmental stages, and being able to kind of name that is, one, going to not jar anyone as they're learning along the way. It will kind of be like, oh yeah, I kind of remember my parent, my teacher, somebody saying to me that this is normal, that this is a thing that could happen. So it's not as jarring. And it also starts to model communication around what it's like to talk about to sex and pleasure and desire, it's helpful to know that not only for the purpose of discussing boundaries and consent, but also just if you decide to be in a relationship down the road, having the tools to communicate your wants and needs in a relationship, be it sexually or otherwise, is a very important tool. It's what we would all objectively agree to that. It's just we tend to for some reason place all the things that we tend to focus on in relationships and communication and what we need to be, successful in all the other areas of our lives. We, for some reason, put sex on the outside, and it's almost just about, can we take everything that we're already doing as far as preparing ourselves for the best possible outcome? Can we apply that as well to this sexual part of ourselves? So I would just say, to kind of like summarize that, I guess, is if we could just normalize the communication around it and start the education, age-appropriate education very early, and not just about sex and having it or not, but again, pleasure, understanding your body, what it's like to communicate, relationship expectations when you have partners in high school, like how often has anyone talked about kind of, that's a real relationship. So you're trying that on for the first time. Wouldn't it be nice if your teen or your tween was equipped with an ability to dialogue around what's okay with them and what's not?
Yeah. And how that will look or could look in Hood College? Like, why is it important to talk about sexual wellness here in the context of Hood College?
Oh, at Hood, yes. It's well, just in general, there's such a if you're at this stage where you're kind of navigating so many new paths and making so many plans, for your future, both educationally, professionally, academically rather, there's a lot of, this is a very specific context in your life right now where, and everyone's looks different, right? But how that informs your ability to kind of tune into what it is that you want sexually for yourself, whether you're kind of coming into your own, being your own body, your own way that you want to express, the relationships, the people you want to invite in, having to do this in this moment where there is a lot of pressure around your studies, your focus, whether there's financial stressors about paying for it, whether you're somebody who maybe has a bit more freedom and maybe therefore more freedom to explore sexual wellness. Maybe this is a really tough time and you're, an adult with a family working, trying to pursue a degree, and your sex life and that as a priority takes a back seat. This context that exists right now at Hood is very relevant as far as how it's impacting, good or bad, your sexual wellness journey. And so having that kind of awareness that, the sexual wellness process, the journey towards it, is going to ebb and flow, and what's happening in the background certainly impacts that. So I say that just to say it's important to consider, because maybe you're somebody who's like, this is incredible. And I have, school's comes very easy for me, and maybe I don't have as many stressors. And so it's very easy for me to tune into myself sexually. And then down the road, something may happen where you're like, why isn't it like it was when I was at Hood? And it's like, oh, the context is very different. And, vice versa, if you're somebody who's really like, Hood is one of the many things you're having to do, and sex feels like it's so distant, and prioritizing this is just like, yeah, sure, lady, like, let me put that on my list of things to do. Well, that makes sense too, because there's a lot happening. And so this is just a moment. And at any point, you can kind of pull it back in on your priority list when that context maybe is a little bit different for you.
Yeah, right. Definitely.
Yeah.
How can listeners get in touch with you and learn more about you and all the work that you do in sexual wellness?
Oh, sure. Well, actually, so I work for Peak Therapy, which is primarily out of DC. We are a virtual practice, entirely virtual. So our website is actually thepeaktherapy.com. And we also, I'm licensed in DC and Maryland, but we have many other therapists who are licensed from all around the DMV and Washington State as well. However, if you're not seeking therapy, we also offer workshops throughout the year where it's not therapy. So anybody from anywhere can sign up for those. We have another one coming up in September, actually, that's primarily focused on women. It's called Peak Eroticism, PQ. And it would also be on our website as well. And it's just a 5-week workshop that deals with women's sexual empowerment, kind of diving into some of what we talked about today, how to kind of lasso a bit the sexual self that one might be hoping for, how to kind of grab the reins on that, prioritize pleasure, and then how to communicate that with partners is a lot of the focus there. So a lot of different avenues, and then of course, most of the time, many springs I will be teaching at Hood. So certainly you can look for my name then too around the spring semester and join me in sexual wellness counseling.
That's a great class, by the way. Thank you so much. If you can share that information with me, I can definitely put it in the description of the episode so people can reach out to the website and maybe your email if you feel comfortable with that. So, and all these workshops and everything, I am interested actually.
Oh, okay, perfect.
It will be great to put it in the description so people can see it and join if they want. I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to share about yourself or the sexual wellness area that I didn't ask.
I guess it's probably a bit redundant, but I guess I would say the biggest thing with if you're somebody who's just curious about, understanding your own sexuality, whatever that means, sometimes these wonderful moments in our culture where there is a lot of progress happening, sometimes these terms though can become very like buzzwordy and feel very broad and not really like, what does that even mean? Like sexual journey, sexual wellness, like I get it. It can sound a little something, but ultimately what it kind of boils down to is really just if one can kind of take the time to just be curious about what it is that informs and motivates the sexual experiences that they are or are not having, and doing that without judgment, because it's normal. Whatever your answer is, that's normal and that's right for you. And just kind of noticing if you're starting to find yourself comparing or thriving for something that maybe looks a little different. Is that something that you're genuinely curious about? Then great, let's explore that. But is it something that feels like other people are doing this, or it feels like maybe I should be outside of this box in a certain way? Just bringing that, recognizing that whatever works for you is right. That's the right answer. And curiosity is key in all of this. Curiosity about why something works, why something doesn't work. And that it's not a competition. Whatever works for you is going to satisfy and access the most pleasure that you will have available to yourself or with any partners you share with.
Yeah, as soon as we don't harm anybody.
Yes. Very important part.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoy it. I learned a lot. And thank you for your time.
Of course. It was so good to see you again. I was happy to do it.
Me too.
Thank you so much for listening to A Degree Further, the official podcast of the graduate school at Hood College, where we help you go farther in your life, in your career, and in your community. Be sure to tune in next time and to catch up on all the latest episodes. Visit hood.edu/a degree further. I'm your host, Mariana, and thank you so much for listening.